Okay, so let me start with my quick introduction. Good morning, all, and thanks for your time to join this demo. My name is Ravi Kumar. Okay, so my name is Ravi Kumar, and I'm based out of Bangalore. About my experience, I have 11 plus years of experience in IT industry, where I take care of consulting, implementing, and administration of Microsoft and VMware product. In cloud services, I take care of Azure Active Directory, Azure administration and migration to Azure, Office 365 implementation and migration to Office 365 from Exchange and Google Suite. And in on-prem virtualization, I have experience in VMware as well as Hyper-V. And also I take care of Microsoft services like Windows Server administration and any services running on top of it like AD, DNS, so on. And also as a part of messaging, I take care of Exchange services, right? So this is a bit overview about my experience. Okay, so let's get started. So if I'm going fast or if you need any more relevant example, please stop and ask me anytime. Okay. So this training, what we are going to cover is AZ-104, which is Azure Administration. Okay, it's not this one. 1 second. Okay, so total there are 15 modules in this entire training, where we'll be focusing to cover the AZ-10 course content and also the certification content. Okay, and we'll be discussing about the introduction, like overview of Azure. So what is cloud computing? What is Microsoft Azure? What are the benefits of cloud computing? Types of cloud computing, types of cloud services, and what are the ways you manage Azure? We'll be covering in the module 1. In module 2, where we'll be covering what is Azure subscription and what are the, how do you create and manage your subscription and how do you handle the resources. And we'll be covering on the compute workload. So what is Azure virtual machine? Like how do you create, how do you manage the compute workload? We'll be seeing it. And also we'll be seeing as a part of automation, we'll be seeing what is ARM, what is ARM template. And we'll be covering on the Azure calculator, right? So whenever you get any requirement, how to deal with that. So how the billing will be done, right? So what are the ways the charges will be applied? We'll be covering in the Azure calculator. We'll also be covering on the Azure storage, like how do you keep your data? How do you manage your data in cloud? So what is Azure storage? What are the ways and what are the types of cloud services we'll be seeing in the storage part? We'll be covering on the Azure networking, right? So the networking is one of the core component. What is virtual network in Azure? How to create the virtual network? And what are the ways you will be connecting when you have more than one virtual network, right? So how do you connect that? And how do you extend your on-prem connectivity to Azure using the secure private tunnel using VPN? We'll be covering point to site VPN. And also we'll be covering on the Azure load balancing solution, right? So what is Azure load balancer, how to deploy, and how do we work with the load balancing solution? Okay. And also we'll be covering about the network security group, right? How do you control your traffic flow within your Azure using the network security group? We'll be seeing this. So with this, we'll be covering the core services, right? So we'll be covering the core services. And the next thing will be the general admin task, right? So what all the day-to-day activity you will be performing with respect to your workload, like how do you create, like how do you add the additional disk, remove the disk, and how do you scale up, scale down, vertical scaling, how do you modify the network card properties, and how do you work with your IP configuration like dynamic to static, and how do you deal with your custom DNS, how do you work with the snapshot, and how do you work with your imaging part, right? So these are things wherein we will be dealing with this one. Okay, and also we'll be covering on the high availability services, right? Like when you are trying to deploy any virtual machine in the cloud. So when we are hosting the application in a scalability and as well as on the redundancy, wherein we use the high availability services, like how do you create your workload in high availability services, what are the available options. And also we'll be seeing about the scale set, right? So how do you work with your horizontal scaling in an automated way? We'll see the Azure scale set. Okay. And also we'll be covering two core PaaS services, which is application service. Earlier it was called as a web app. And also we'll be covering on the SQL DB, right? So in this, we will be seeing like how to create this PaaS service, what is PaaS service, how to create the PaaS service, how do we work, and what all our scope, right? So we'll be covering on that. And also as a part of identity and access management, we'll be covering on Azure Active Directory. So overview of Azure Active Directory, creating and managing users groups in Azure AD. How do you work with your Azure resources by providing the permission to your objects? And what is Azure AD Premium? Okay. How do you work with your multi-factor authentication like two-step verification? And how do you integrate your on-prem AD with Azure AD? Right. So this is what we'll be covering in the module 12. And also as a part of data protection, right? So we'll be seeing what is Azure Recovery Services, how do we work with the Azure Recovery Services to back up your on-prem data, to back up your cloud services, right? So we'll be covering on the recovery services. And also we'll be working on monitoring and troubleshooting, right? So what are the day-to-day activity with respect to monitor your workload and troubleshoot the connectivity issues, right? So these are the topics wherein we'll be covering. So this is the entire 15 topics wherein we'll be covering. If at all, if you need to add any other topic which is related to Azure administration, we can add that. Okay. Any doubt, any questions on the course content part?
Yeah, hello.
Hi, Mahendra,
Yeah, I have one doubt. What is Azure Data and Azure DevOps? Both are different collaborate with same.
tell me. There are a lot of noises coming, so can you just check with your audio and can you speak back? Yeah, please tell me. You're asking something. I didn't get your question. Okay, that's fine. Like you can type in a chat so I can respond to that because I didn't get your question. Okay. Azure Data Science and Azure DevOps. So do you mean that? Okay. All right. So I'll take you through that. Just give me 1 minute. Okay. Because the next slide, I'll tell you what are the course content. So you'll get some idea. Then there we will discuss about the Azure Data Factory or whatever you're looking for. Okay. All right. Any other questions on the content part? Let me know. So this course is up to like 30 hours, right? So minimum 30 hours will be there, which includes your theory and practical. So sometime depends upon practicals that may drag. Okay. So you can take like 30 hours. So in a day we'll work like 1 hour a day. So 5 to 6 weeks will be covering this content. Okay. All right. Okay. So when you talk about the career path in Azure, no? So let's see what is the career path in Azure or learning path we can say, right? Where you can now also there was a question, what is Azure DevOps, what is Azure Data Factory, right? What is Azure administration, so on. Okay, I'll cover that part, the fundamentals part. Okay, see, basically when you want to start your career journey in a cloud, right? So you should know the base concepts of the cloud. So the AZ-900 is the Azure fundamentals, right? So which talks completely about the cloud and the cloud fundamentals topics. Okay, and when it comes to certification, it's an optional certification. It's not a prerequisite. Okay, that is one thing. So earlier this was called as AZ-103 and now it's called as AZ-104, which is Azure Administration. That is the course what we are going to study here, and that is what the course content what we have discussed so far, which is Azure Administrator Associate. Okay. And the other track is Azure DevOps, Azure development, right? So developing solution in Azure, which is the AZ-204. So when you talk about the IT, right? So there are two parts here. So one is the development, other one is the infrastructure. So AZ-104, which talks about the complete infrastructure management and administration. AZ-204, which talks about the Azure developing solution, right? So developing solution in Azure. So this is basically for a developer content. Okay. So these are the two main tracks, what we can say. And now you're asking the DevOps, right? So DevOps is the next level of an administrator or for a developer, right? So wherein the administrator, right? So I'm the administrator where I take it off the compute network and security and other parts. And the developer is going to develop the application. So whatever the application which is developed will be hosted on the infrastructure, right? So I manage the infrastructure. The developer take care of the development part. So now there is one more part here, which is the DevOps. The DevOps guy is the one who sits between the developer and the administrator, who take care of integration of the application which is developed on the infrastructure part, right? So that is the Azure DevOps, right? So basically that is called DevOps. Now here, when you learn on the Azure services, that is called as Azure DevOps. So if you want to be Azure DevOps, so now you have to cover 104 and plus you need to cover this AZ-400, right? So this is one track to achieve Azure DevOps Engineer Expert. Otherwise, also you can cover what 204 means you can learn 204 plus AZ-400, right? So with this also you can achieve the Azure DevOps. So there are two paths to achieve the Azure DevOps. So now you got an idea what is Azure Administrator. Basically, we manage the infrastructure. So we saw the content. Developing solution in Azure, that talks about like developing your Azure infrastructure part, right? And DevOps, wherein it comes in between the developer and the infrastructure, this guy will help to integrate the services on the platform. You're clear on the DevOps part? Any questions on this? Okay. So when it comes to fundamentals, now AZ-900 is the fundamentals paper. So it's an optional certification. It's not mandatory that you should certify only, then you should go to 104. You can directly take 104. Okay. So whatever the content in AZ-900, the Azure fundamentals, the cloud fundamentals, I'll be covering. In the module one, we'll be covering that. Don't worry. Okay. That is also an optional certification. You can ignore it for taking the certification. You can plan directly for 104. Okay, so fundamentals are covered in our content. Need not worry on that. Any questions on this? So I don't know the name with the DS. So your question is covered, right? Okay. All right. The next part is like there are still more certification. Now you have done 104. What next, right? So one option is if you're interested in DevOps, you can study AZ-400. Or if you're looking in a next level, like architect level. So earlier we had a different track. So this is gone. This has been retired. So after 104, you can learn and you can certify with AZ-305. So which is then it's now okay. It is 305. So which talks about the Azure Solution Architect Expert. Okay. After 104, you learn and take certify with 305. So you'll be Azure DevOps Engineer Expert. Sorry, Azure Architect Expert. So this is the other track. There are still more tracks, right? Azure Data Factory or Azure Data Engineering or Data Science, whatever you ask now. So that is related to your data, right? So it's completely your what do you say, analytics, data analytics or something it's called, no? So it talks completely about your data analytics part. So that is a different track. Okay, that is a different learning where you'll be analyzing the data. So this data where you'll be doing it on the cloud, right? So that is talks about the Azure Data Factory, ADF, or Azure Data Engineering, so on. And still there are other track, like if you want to learn a core networking, right? So 104 plus 305 will cover most of the networking concept, and there is a separate content which is AZ-700, which talks purely about the networking part. Okay, so this is the networking, and also there are different other tracks, like if you are looking on identity and access management, SC300 is there, and if you're looking on security compliance, SC100 is there, right? So there are different tracks are there, so you can choose. Security is also there, AZ-500. After for 104, if you want to understand how the security world work, you can learn AZ-500 also. Okay, so this is about the learning path in Microsoft Azure. Any questions on this? So shall I move next? Okay, so now let's take example. I want to start my career as a cloud administrator or Azure admin, right? So what are the prerequisites? Okay, so let's consider you're a fresher, right? So you have done your graduation, now you plan to start your career as a cloud admin. So am I okay to start with this, or is there any prerequisite? Okay, yes, you can start as a fresher. Okay, and second part, right? The second part, like let's take example, I have an experience in IT, like I work on a networking, storage, or Windows or VMware, whatever. So now I want to start my career as a cloud admin. Okay, so will I be able to start this? Yes, you can start. Okay, and let's take example, you have a IT experience in a different domain, like I'm from a testing, or I'm from a SAP, or I'm from a Oracle, or whatever. So now I want to start as a Azure admin. Can I start? Yes, you can start. Or you have an experience in non-technical domain, now you're planning to switch to technical domain. AZ-104 is a right track? Yes, it's a right track. Okay, means if you want to start your cloud journey as an experience with IT or non-IT or as a fresher, yes, AZ-104 is the right content where you can start. So only thing is that there is some prerequisite where you have to learn, right? The cloud part from scratch we will be starting, or like we'll be starting from the baseline, right? Okay, and still you need to understand there are some concepts like here you'll be managing a Windows server or a Linux server, right? So we'll be hosting it. So you should know how to do a basic administration of Windows and Linux machine, right? And also you should be knowing how do you work with the this one, what do you say, virtualization concept. What is virtualization? How do you deal with the virtualization concept, right? So that you should know on that. Okay, and also you should be knowing the cloud infrastructure anyways, that will be covered. Okay, and you should know some basic about the storage part. Okay, and also you should be knowing about the basics of networking. What is network, what is IP address, what is subnetting, what is network routing switches, some basics of it. So if you know the expertise level, that is also fine. If you are don't know anything, at least some basics you should learn. Because so one way wherein the same concepts will be using on the cloud, wherein we don't work on a core level, but still we'll be using like the IP address, subnetting, right? So those things will be used. But here we will not be configuring any physical hardware like a RAID configuration or a hypervisor configuration or a switch configuration, router configuration. We don't do that. So everything we manage here as a software asset, software defined data center, we can say, right? Okay, that is one thing. And also you should be knowing about the virtualization, as I told you, like what is virtual machine, what is virtual network, what is virtual hard disk, and overview of that. If you're eager to learn more, yes, you can go ahead and do it. At least you should have some basics, right? Suppose if you are a if you're non-technical guy, or if you don't know about the virtualization, and here if I talk about the virtual machine, virtual disk, you'll not be getting much idea, right? So that's what I'm going to say. And also you should know other concepts like what is DNS, what is VPN, what is firewall, what is encryption, why we use it, how this will help you in a real time. Some basics overview, you should be knowing it. And also some other concepts like what is a backup, what is disaster recovery, what is restore, why we require backup, right? So these concepts you should be knowing it. So these are the prerequisites. So if you know, well and good. If you don't know, you can start learning parallelly. If you need any help on understanding these concepts, you can let me know. Okay, so this is about the prerequisite part. Any questions, any doubts on this? And also this training will be 90% practical oriented, right? So we discussed about the theory concepts, and we will be creating the account in Azure, and I'll be demonstrating like how to create the services in a real time, and even you can practice your lab there, right? So it's a hands-on lab. So wherein we discuss the concept, you do your lab so that you'll be good enough. Okay. Okay, so what will be the cloud administrator role? So now you might have a question, okay, I completed this course, right? So what will be my day-to-day activity, right? So what will be my day-to-day activity? As part of the cloud administrator role, no, wherein you will be taking care of the cloud services, right? Like any services, like it can be the compute, network, storage, right? The entire IT life cycle model wherein we will be covering in this means in the cloud, like developing the infrastructure and hosting your infrastructure, updating or upgrading your infrastructure, or decommissioning your infrastructure, right? So entire IT lifecycle model wherein you will be managing in the cloud, where you will be taking the end user request, right? Now I'm a developer or I'm an application developer guy, right? So I put a request saying that I want a server or I want the existing infrastructure to run in this networking part, right? So I want to perform or protect my data, right? So all these things wherein you will be configuring, in the sense wherein you will be taking care of the end user request to create the services in cloud or decommission, upgrade, or decommission or update the infrastructure. And also you'll be performing the, what do you say, you'll be taking care of the performance part, like you'll be monitoring the services running in the cloud if it's under provision or over provision, right? So you'll be taking care of that, right? So you'll be monitoring the services running on that. And sometime wherein you'll be interacting with the engineers who is managing in the on-prem, or sometime you'll be interacting with the engineers who are, like, you'll be interacting with the vendors like ISP provider or any other service provider, right? So you will be taking care of this. And when you say, what are the ways you manage your Azure infrastructure, right? So you'll be managing your Azure through the Azure portal, right? So the web-based portal, you'll be managing your infrastructure. And also you'll be managing your Azure through the command line interface. So these are the two ways wherein you'll be managing your Azure. As a successful cloud administrator, wherein you'll be taking care of the OS, like what are the virtual machines running on the cloud, and also the storage and network and other services, right? So this will be the cloud administrator role. Okay, yeah. Any questions, any doubts on this? Yeah, any questions, any scripting knowledge required? Yes. Okay, so here you need to know the scripting knowledge, in the sense here we are not developing anything, right? So we will be administrating our infrastructure. Yeah, small tasks you can do it with the graphical user interface, but whenever you want to do or you say that whenever you want to do a multitasking, or like whenever you want to do an or you say bulk operation and all, no, wherein you require the scripting knowledge, yes, it's good that, like, if you learn, but it's not a mandatory, but you have to learn as and when you are growing your career, wherein you need to know the scripting knowledge on that. Okay, yeah. Any questions, any doubts on this? Hope you guys are good. And also please share your email ID and phone number so that we'll be in touch with you on that. Okay, objectives we have already discussed on this. Okay, certification, anyways, don't worry. Like after completing this course, we'll be helping you to prepare for your certification. And also, always it's good that you clear your certification. Okay. All right. So if you have any doubt, any questions, let me know on this. Let me see if my Azure account is working. So that it was. So if this account is active, I'll show you a live lab, like how it runs. So this is the Azure portal, right? So I'm connecting to my Azure portal. So even in your real time, you'll be managing the same. So here there is no stimulation. We do everything in real time. Okay. And let me see if my subscription is active. If it's active, I'll show you how to deploy. Otherwise, we'll not be able to do that. Oh, sorry, it's disabled. Okay, anyways, like in the upcoming classes, I'll be showing it. So this is how wherein we'll be connecting to the Azure portal. So now we will discuss about a service. Let's take example. We discuss about the virtual machine. So we will be discussing like what is virtual machine and all. Then we will be coming to our Azure portal. Then here I'll show you how to create the virtual machine, and each and every steps we'll be discussing that. So currently my account is disabled. Otherwise I was showing you. Okay. So in this, I'll be explaining like each and every properties of this. Then I'll be showing like how to access this virtual machine as a service. Then again, the same thing even you can try on your lab, right? So this is how our lab will work. And also I'll be giving you the scenario based, right? So I'll be giving you the scenario wherein you will be working on the task. And also I'll be giving you some lab exercise where you can practice it, right? So this is how the entire training runs. Okay. Yeah. Any questions, any doubts on this? Okay, if you have any doubt, any questions about the course content, let me know. We'll discuss on that. So today I don't have the lab session to show because my subscription is disabled. Anyways, we'll be seeing in the upcoming classes. Yeah, any other doubt, any other questions so far? Yeah, Azure admin is good enough to get the job. Even you can search here, right? Azure Administrator jobs in India. So you can see a lot of job openings, right? So with AZ-104 is also enough. But again, in the market, people will be asking more. So this is the first step wherein you'll be learning and wherein you can start on the next level, like learning other things if required. So you can see Azure Admin IaaS, Infrastructure as a Service, plus Windows Administration they look. So here you can see they're asking few other things as well, right? So KQL knowledge, that some basic knowledge is required, right? So again, they will be looking additional AZ-400. Again, if you want to learn 400, 104 is also one of the baseline you have to do it, right? So containers, this all covers under your AZ-400 containers and Kubernetes. ARM templates is covered under our Azure administration, right? So Azure function and all is different. Okay. Basics PowerShell will cover. Don't worry on that. Okay. Yeah. So SQL is a completely different track that you can leave it. Azure DevOps admin. So here you can see there will be additional things asked like AZ-104 plus AZ-400. So you can see the CI/CD pipeline, Azure DevOps part. Okay. Azure Data Factors is separate. Anyways, you'll be looking on the CI/CD pipeline, right? So here in the DevOps, you need to have some basics of coding language. How many? So Mahinder, we don't have your contact details. Can you please share your phone number and email ID? Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. So Azure admin content, yes, you get a good amount of job. And if you want to upgrade, obviously we should have additional skills. Then you'll be more demand in the market. So it's good that you can learn Azure DevOps or Azure Architect as per your interests and yeah. So how many years typically do employer ask for Azure admin position? See, again, now even it depends upon if you are a L1, L2, L3 in Azure. So it depends upon. But still, if you have infrastructure experience and if you have Azure admin knowledge, then you will be starting it as a L0, but still not as a L0, but means L1 on the Azure, but still you have a technical experience, right? So that will be considered in that way. If at all, if you are technically, you don't have any experience and you learned the Azure, then you will be considered as a level 1 engineer. Do we generally need data center experience on servers on this role? Not required. So as I told you, you can start as a fresher. In the sense, here you don't touch any physical hardware, right? Not a server hardware, not a storage hardware, not a network hardware. Everything you'll be managing in this portal, right? So you can see here, if I try to create a virtual machine here on a backend, I'm not touching the hardware, I'm not managing the hypervisor, right? So here I create a virtual machine. So how your in your organization, if someone want to get a virtual machine to run their application, right? So they place a request, the virtual machine admin or an means virtualization admin or a Windows admin or a Linux admin, he creates a virtual machine and he will hand over to him, right? So same way here also it will happen. No physical hardware experience is required, but if you have it, that's fine. Okay. And also sometime wherein you may need to manage your on-prem plus cloud. In that case, yes, this might be required. But for a cloud administration, the hardware level knowledge is not required. In the sense, experience is not mandatory. But if you have knowledge or if you're eager to learn, yes, you're good to do that. So here also, if you observe, I'm an Azure admin. I'm creating the virtual machine, but I'm not touching the data center or physical hardware or a hypervisor, right? I put my requirement here. The server will be configured. I get the credential. I get the IP address. I log in. I will manage. Anything on the hardware level is taken care by the vendor. So we'll discuss that, right? So when we go start with the module 1, where we'll be learning each and everything there. All right. Any other doubt? Any other questions so far? Please let me know. Hope you guys have some idea about the Azure admin, and I hope whatever the time you spent, you got some useful information. Yes, yes, everything will be shared. Don't worry on that. The entire course outline will be shared. And also,
From when and what time?
timing we'll discuss. Start from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. 1 hour.
Uh-huh.
We will plan that. Okay, it will be in morning time only.
Okay. The course duration is that is 30 days, right?
30 hours. We can say 30 hours.
30 hours. Okay.
Yeah. Even it will go more than that, but minimum it will be 30 hours to complete this entire content. Okay. All right, then if you have any doubt, any question, please feel free to reach us anytime. So we will discuss that. Okay. All right. Thank you guys. Thanks for your time. Appreciate that. Have a great weekend. We will connect in the upcoming class.